Hi there, I'm Rebecca and a really warm welcome back to my channel, created by Rebecca. In this week's video, we're going to be making this fancy Tudor style pouch. Let's get started. So this is some more kit to go with my Tudor reenactment that I'll be doing on August bank holiday weekend at Hever Castle. And I plan to be doing some Blackwork, which is an embroidery technique, and I thought if I have this bag I can have it with me and it'll look all lovely and fancy. So it's got a handle, it's lined, I even made the ornaments that are on it, I jazzed up the tassels, and I made the brooch, ouch, it's one of those, for the bottom. And that's all faux pearl and also green agate. And they go with the necklace that I made as well. I started off by drawing and cutting out a dual purpose pattern for my pouch. It does the front and the back. And I wanted to make sure that it was big enough for my hand to fit in. I cut out some of my green sateen. It's not silk, it's polyester probably, and it's very shreddy and not easy to sew with. When I made my cap with it, I sewed it by hand and that was fine. Then I lay it onto the velvet and I cut that out. So this is the back, which has the flap on it. And then I pin down the flap on the paper pattern. And that makes my new pattern for the front. So I'm going to cut one lining out of the green, and then once I've just double checked which way my pile is lying, I will do the outer fabric. This satin is very slippery. I'm putting it right sides together, and the right side is the shiniest. And then I'm going to pin through. Even the pins were pulling at the fabric, so it really didn't want to play. So I put in as many pins as I could find, just to make sure it didn't move. And then I just laid the pattern on and just marked out where I was going to sew my hem. Then I pinned together the velvet, and I actually pinned the pattern straight onto the velvet rather than trying to mark it out with chalk or anything like that. And that's right sides together. Now I begin to regret my life choices, and particularly the one where I decided to use a machine to sew the lining, because all my machine wanted to do was eat the sateen. I really should have changed the needle to a ballpoint. I think that would have helped. But I just decided to press on and kind of stretch the fabric back out a little bit where it had pulled. It's going to be entirely inside the bag, so it doesn't matter. Now I'm using the pattern as a sewing guide on the velvet and just carefully sewing around that. I want to make sure that the corners and point are nice and crisp. They're what's going to give this bag its shape, so worth sort of taking it steady around those corners. And my machine handled the velvet just fine. I trimmed off the excess, and if you think glitter is a problem, you just try cutting velvet. Oh, it goes everywhere. Then I clip the edges, carefully avoiding the stitching. And turn the pocket right side out. I pop my hand right in and use it to push out all the seams and make it lie nice and flat. Then I go ahead and trim the excess off the green lining. There's no reason to clip the corners on this because it is staying inside out. So I'm just making sure it's right down to the bottom of the velvet pouch. Nicely spread out, and then I'm just pinning everything into place just so that it doesn't shift around when I try sewing it. The next bit is going to be done by hand, so I shouldn't get into too much trouble. The pins were struggling to go through 2 layers of the lining and 2 layers of the velvet. I'm turning the top edge of the front inside and making a little hem, which I'm just pinning under, and then I am folding the lining outwards and joining it with the pins to that hem I've just made along the front face. That's going to conceal all those raw edges and just make that look really neat. I'm making sure that the green lining stays just a little bit lower than the black edge so that the green isn't seen from the outside when the bag is shut. And because this is so slippery, it does take a little bit of finagling, but we get there. I catch my piece of thread with a couple of passes through the edge, and then use a felling stitch to join the two together. It just takes tiny bites out of both fabrics, but it doesn't actually come through onto the front face if you're careful and if that's what you're looking for. It's not like a hemming stitch, it's different, and it makes a really pretty little turning. I've pinned the other bit of the lining up towards the front just to get it out of the way, and I'm using my fingers to press the top of the flap into a really nice curve. Then once I'm happy, I unpin the lining and do the same as I did on the front face. I just turn a little hem over, make sure it's going to sit just below the black edge, and then use that felling stitch to just join the two pieces together. I like to keep bits of cord and ribbon from gift bags, and that is exactly where this is from. I used a lighter just to very carefully melt the end, let it cool for a few seconds, and then using my fingertips just gently squished it into a nice compact shape. Please do not burn yourself. Let it cool for just a few seconds before you do it. The flame never comes in contact with the cord. Anyway, get an adult to do this for you if you're not an adult. And if you are an adult, maybe get yourself an adult to help you do it if you don't feel confident. I've tucked that cord in between the lining and the outer fabric, keeping it right up close to the edge of the bag. And now I am just taking little stitches through both the lining fabric and the cord, and then as I work my way around through the velvet and the cord to hold it in place, I do also put some stitches in lower down, coming out through the side hem. That just makes sure it sits nicely and the end doesn't kick up. Now I'm using a lint roller just to make sure I get off all those little bits of black velvet that have come off and the green shredded sateen. There we go, there it is with its flap and everything working nicely. And we need to work out a way of fastening it. Here's the necklace that I've made myself. It has these really pretty filigree brass stations with faux pearl and also some green agate. I think that's going to look rather nice with my coat, which is that sort of gold and then deep foresty green. I made the little squares of pearls just by running some 0.6 wire through all four and then bringing them round on each other and making a little twist at the bottom just to make sure they all stay together. I put the agate onto stations of wrapped loops, and I also made little wrapped loops so that the agates are almost on a sort of a rosary chain type station. They're nice and secure on there, they won't come off. This is the clasp that came off the faux pearls. The strand was actually my mother's from Marks and Spencer's, not sponsored. And when I cut the clasp off the necklace, I thought, I don't want to throw this away, but I don't know what I'm going to use it for. And then it suddenly occurred to me that it would work really well as the clasp for this bag. I'm actually going to use it almost like a button. So there is a handy shank at the back that the bar fits into that locks it shut, the box clasp bit. And I've just passed a split ring through the gap, and it's just going to give me a little bit of play, help it stand off away from the bag a little bit so that I can actually get the thick fabric around it, and it's going to look really in keeping. And you'll never see that slightly Heath Robinson way of attaching it to the bag. I possibly could have tried putting cotton straight through that shank, but I didn't know whether there were any sharp bits, and the last thing I would want to do is shred the cotton on a sharp bit as I'm using it and then lose that clasp. Better to do it this way on something that is smooth and that I know will be fine, and having that little bit of play should put less stress on it. Now I've worked out where that is sitting, I can make a buttonhole for the top. I've sewn a rectangle with back stitch and made some long stitches at the ends. Then I've cut the fabric and now I'm doing my take on a buttonhole stitch. I have no idea how you do a buttonhole stitch, but this is a bit like a blanket stitch, I suppose. So I'm passing the thread around the needle as I go. Remember the brass filigree piece from my necklace? Well, I've got a couple of other sizes that I can play with to make the decoration for the bottom of the bag. And I'm going to go with this big square one. I've threaded 4 of the faux pearls onto some 0.6 wire, and I've just poked legs through convenient places on the little filigree piece so that they make a nice pattern. Pass those legs through and then twist them up nice and tight at the back and cut off any excess. Then I've got some tiny little faux pearls. I don't think they're going to need to be quite as strongly positioned, so what I'm doing is almost using the legs like paper fasteners and just folding them back on themselves so that they sit nice and snug to the filigree piece. That seems to be working, and now I've got a head pin and I've been threading 4 of those agates onto these head pins, and then I'm just twisting up the excess on the back so that they sit nice and firmly on the front face. And I'm just using some black thread to secure that ouch or ooch to the bag. And I can hide the thread behind the gemstones, so you will barely see the stitches. You'd have to be looking really close. I've got 3 of these sweet little tassels that I've taken off various strands of gemstones, and I'm using a black one for the centre and a silver one on either side. I've got these really nice gold-plated brushed copper beads, or I could put an agate and a bead on that centre one and make it long and fancy. This thread is colour gold 04 and it's a metallic thread from Madeira. It's actually a really close representation of how the thread was made for cloth of gold. Gold was hammered out really fine and then cut into tiny strips and wound around a core thread. That's how this has been made. It's just not actual gold. I'm going to use it to cover the silver wrapping that is around each of the tassels. I make a loop and I lay it up by the head of the tassel. Leave one end free but pointing downwards towards the tassel, and then wrap until you've covered what it is you want to cover. Cut the thread and take that end and pass it through the loop that you left at the top. Don't pull it, let go of that thread and pick up the bottom one, the one that is pointing towards the tassel, and pull that gently downwards and it will draw the loop and the other end in behind all the twisting. That means you don't have to do any knots and it will hide your mechanics. You can just pop a dab of glue on just to be super sure it's not going to come undone, but it works beautifully. And I learnt it when I was showing vegetables at village shows, and it's how you prepare onion tops. You tie them off with raffia. There you go. I've put my gold-plated copper bead onto some 0.6 wire, and I'm using really fine needle nose pliers to turn a wrapped loop. Then I pull the bead up to the end to meet that loop. Begin to make the second loop, but then I will cut off the wire, leaving a little tail. And then I will thread on the agate, which is also on a wrapped loop station. And I want to make sure that when I make the final wrap loop for the gold bead, that I keep that agate up in the loop. It mustn't come down between the loop and the gold bead, otherwise it won't sit properly. It must be up in that loop when I close it off. And there we go. I had put some silver split rings onto these tassels, but I'm now changing them out for slightly smaller gold coloured ones. I have a pair of split ring opening pliers, which are very handy. It saves your nails. And then I can just add my little station with the agate and the gold bead. I pass two ends of cotton through the eye of my needle, leaving a loop at the other end. Take a tiny little bite out of the very tip of that bag. Draw the thread through and then feed the needle through the loop at the bottom so I don't have to knot it. Then I pass that through the wrapped loop at the top of my little tassel station. and I give that a good few passes. Knot it, unfortunately, and then pop some matte drying glue on the top. This is Ranger Multimedia Matte, and it's awesome glue. I love it. And then finally I add on the other 2 stations. There we go, all finished. I think that's going to work really well with the rest of my outfit. It's very fancy. Right, that's it for this week's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like, share and subscribe to me here on YouTube. And until next time, bye!